And live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking About Survivor. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike McLean.
Tonight, we're here to talk about Survivor Season 33, Episode 5. And the mix-up has arrived. But, an additional wrinkle. It's always nice when it's not just swapping people around. Yep. Going from 2 to 3 tribes.
Yeah, I like that dynamic.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting just because it almost certainly suggests another mix-up pre-merge. Not a mix-up necessarily, but I bet you they go from 3 to 2 before they go full merge.
Yes, I would agree.
So it just means that whatever new alliances people might form in their new tribe might themselves be short-lived. But we will see. So this was an episode where there was a period during the episode where I was really stressed because I thought that the show was going to come down to either David or Zeke. And I'm like, but I don't want it to be between those two guys.
Right.
And it's still not totally not that. But having Cece be the kind of the first target rather than David sort of dissolves that for now. But, I don't want the two guys that I like kind of being, well, I don't want to imply they're the only two, but I just mean, I like both of them. I would like both of them to stick around.
Yeah.
So you want to just go ahead and start at the beginning?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. So we come back, and David is immediately second-guessing himself about playing the idol, which in one sense makes sense. I mean, after all, you and I talked last week about how it was really kind of a debatable move, right? You could make a case either way, but whatever you pick, you kind of just have to commit and follow through because what else are you going to do? You can't go back and change your mind. You can't reload the save game.
Right. Which, what I thought was kind of funny is the fallout from it. It turned out that what it did was bond Jessica and Ken better. It didn't really get David a new ally as much as it did Ken.
Yeah, I wondered about that. That seemed interesting to me. I think that there might be a couple of reasons for it, but I wonder if also we just didn't get shown as much of Jessica and David connecting because they didn't end up on the same tribe after the mix-up, whereas Jessica and Ken did. So that narrative kind of continues.
Perhaps, yeah.
So it may be that there was something that we didn't see, but it's certainly true that even before, when there was the whole thing of them trying to tell Jessica that she was being targeted and her not believing him, that was Ken, right? And then It was Ken at the tribal council who had the whole big thing of her going, it's like, what, I'm just supposed to believe you? And he's like, yes. So that was them. So even though it was David kind of doing the grand gesture, it does seem like she had more of an existing relationship and dynamic with Ken. So
that's kind of what I felt like, is that they had the relationship, and this showed her that she should have trusted him more than it bought her sway with David.
Yeah. Yeah. So hard to know how exactly that went. It may just be that because they got split up, it wasn't much to show. But so we have David starting this out feeling kind of vulnerable in the sense of okay, now I don't have an idol, and the person I saved, no one else likes. So, and we could still be in the minority, and people could now be mad at me because I did that, and I'm sitting here thinking, yeah, all of those are reasons that maybe you shouldn't have played the idol last night, but you did, so Might as well. I mean, there's no sense waffling about it now because that's the guarantee to make it not work out in your favor. Kind of have to follow through, but then that's when we see that Jessica and Ken, bonding and her telling him about the legacy advantage. And I had that same thought that you were kind of mentioning of her promising it to him, and I'm thinking, Ken voted for you. It was David's playing his own idol that saved you.
Well, I thought this was odd too because I didn't see her actually promise it to him. She said, if I had gone home and could have given it to someone at the time, I would give it to you.
Yeah.
She didn't say she promised it to him. He just took it.
Yeah, I feel like she did phrase it weirdly, but honestly, if I were Ken and she later tried to say, well, I didn't actually promise, I would say, look, the only way what you said makes sense is if you're promising it to me. Otherwise, you didn't actually say anything. You said a bunch of words with no meaning.
I didn't see it that way. I just saw her saying, like, hey, like, I'm trying to tell you that even though I didn't believe you, I still have had a relationship with you, and so I would have done this for you. I didn't see it as a promise at all. That's not what I read out of it.
Well, but she was talking of, I don't know. You might be right, but
he said that I was like, he definitely misunderstood that conversation. But now, obviously, you took it that same way too, so it's more complicated than I originally thought also.
Well, I guess I almost just was maybe inclined to give Jessica more credit, because if all she was saying is, I have this thing, and I would have given it to you. I feel like if that's all she's saying, then the logical follow-up is, and?
That's kind of where I was at, and that's why this stuck out with me, is that my thought at the time was, that's weird that you just told him that, because now you've just made yourself a target by him if later on, because...
Well, yeah, if she goes out, well, I suppose he can't. Yeah,
if he knows that he gets this legacy by getting rid of her, it's like, that's incentive.
Well, I suppose there is that, and it's also possible that one of the reasons she said it weird is because she kind of had that realization halfway through. Is like, am I giving him incentive to vote me out? But I mean, we don't know exactly how it works because it's the first season. But my impression would be that you don't decide before getting voted out who it goes to. So if he betrayed her and got her voted out, she doesn't still have to give it to him.
Correct.
So I don't feel like there would be as much of that kind of incentive unless you felt like you could really do it and totally get away with it and not have them know that you were at all responsible.
Right.
Which is much harder. But yeah, I don't know. I just sort of feel like she said it in a weird way that felt to me like she said it strangely, but the only thing I could think that it would mean is that she was saying, I will give it to you. And it's all a very hypothetical thing at this point because her intent is to keep it. But she's kind of just saying, like, if I were to get voted out, because like the sentence is constructed weird because she's talking about a hypothetical that she hopes doesn't happen.
Right.
If I were to get voted out, I would have given it, like, left it to you. But she's still talking about a future thing. Because she's talking about later in the game. I don't know. She said it very strangely, and I sort of, maybe the only reason I interpreted it the same way he did is just because if that's not what she meant, then she's being a real weasel about it. Because I don't think she had a straightforward... if that's not what she was trying to convey, then she's being... she should. it's one thing to say it's one thing to hesitate to officially promise that, like, I promise on my children's lives that I will give you this thing. It's one thing to be more equivocal than that. But just saying, oh, I would have given it to you if I'd gotten voted out, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't see how saying that would mean anything in the context of the conversation they're having.
Right.
Because what she's telling him at this point is, I didn't trust you, but it turns out you were telling me the truth, and now I believe you and I want to work with you. And so I would have left it to you if I got voted out, but now I'm promising nothing. That doesn't... Like, I hear what you're saying, too, because she definitely phrased it strangely.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. Now I'm second-guessing it, too. In any case, I guess what I conclude is that whatever she said, she does kind of owe them something. Which is not to say that she owes them in any kind of a moral sense. If it really comes down to her believing that her game, is better served by her not repaying these guys, then I wouldn't really hold it against her exactly.
Right.
But it's still a case of they stuck their neck out, or David did at least, and Ken too, because she then went and told on him and got him in trouble with the others, right? So they stuck their neck out to help her, and she, told on them when it turns out that they were really trying to help. So I feel like that there's not, it's not a tit for tat sort of thing, but at the same time, they did something for her, and to not acknowledge that in a meaningful way is a failure on her part, I think.
Yeah.
Now, again, the game is the game. If it really comes down to her having to make a choice, then that's one thing. But otherwise, I would hope that she would be prepared, especially when all it is, when we're talking about the legacy advantage, it only comes into play if she... Luna! 1 second. Sorry, had to mute the dog here. When the legacy advantage, it doesn't even figure into anything unless she gets voted out, right?
Right.
So, why wouldn't she? She would have to think that someone else deserves it more?
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Anyway, I'm honestly still not sure what I think about Jessica, because I feel like I wanted to like her more, but her not believing them in the first place and being a little weird about it after the fact, which, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can see where that would come from, but it doesn't make me appreciate her.
Right.
So in any case, we have the Gen X tribe all declaring that it's an official, no shame purge day for looking for the idol. It's back in play, and everybody gets to look for it, and it's this weird sort of agreed upon social norm that they all get to look for it, consequence free.
Yep.
And I hadn't thought about it, but isn't it kind of interesting, the idea that David has that strategic advantage simply based on knowing how it was hidden the last time with the whole symbol and everything? So he knows what he's looking for.
Yeah, you wouldn't have thought about that mattering until you see it in play, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's a great advantage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and it's funny, too, just in the context of he might have told somebody about that if it ever had come up. Like, well, where was it hidden? He's like, oh, well, and he could have just told the story, but, didn't, and probably for the best. He also could have made something up, and how would have anyone else have ever known until they watched the show later? But it's so funny that he just finds it again. Good for him. Although it's just in time to put himself right back in a similar sort of situation where he makes the other decision this time.
Yeah, and I don't know. I've heard it different ways. Like I've heard that, like I think Dalton Ross said that last time it was an absolute, like he should not have played it.
Mm-hmm.
And that this time it was more up in the air. You could make an argument for playing it and for not playing it, but ultimately not playing it's probably still the best choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't agree with those degrees. Like I thought last time was much more up in the air and that there were risks associated with both.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this time was much more sure that you should not play it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can accomplish, especially his arguments for it were, the number one was that you get to get rid of Michelle,
Mm-hmm.
who has already said, even to your face, that she is looking to target you. But I see it as, okay, and that he becomes the target in as far as challenges go, because now Cece's been removed. They're both terrible at challenges, but she's clearly the worst and the most liable. With her gone, he now becomes the biggest target. And if you think it through till next time, let's say that happens and he performs poorly in the challenge and they're right back here and Michelle is targeting him. Well, now he has the idol. So as opposed to getting rid of Michelle, having them still come back to tribal council because now they have two poor challenge performers still.
Mm-hmm.
Having somebody who has now that he's burned twice, and Zeke, who has a bond with that person and is not likely to flip on them, you're looking at a deadlock, or Cece just flipping on you because it's advantageous to her if she's the other target. So your best case scenario is a deadlock next time where you're still one of the targets. Whereas in this one, even if you become the main target and you want to get rid of Michelle, you can do that next time if you come back to tribal council because you saved your idol. So in that kind of short-term thinking of that, I think this was absolutely the best play.
Mm-hmm.
And his other argument was the long-term play is, you get rid of Michelle, and the next time you get rid of Zeke, and now you've evened the numbers of Gen X's and Millennials. I do not see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
If David does that and pisses off Chris, that he's just going to be like, he's going to see that long play. He's going to be like, oh yeah, you're right, we should get rid of that. No, he's going to say, I was lost with the Gen Xers and I was getting betrayed by them. I'd rather take my chances with these Millennials, especially since the one that's left is a guy I have a bond with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see him flipping for that. And so that long play, I think, is a wash. So I saw this as a slam dunk. Do not do it. Save it. And if you end up in a situation next time, then you do it and you accomplish the same result without pissing off somebody who's trusted you twice and put yourself and weaken the tribe in challenges.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was an absolute guarantee you shouldn't do it. But that's...
Yeah, I agree. And I actually the first reasons that came to mind were a little different than what you said, but I certainly agree with the conclusion. My reasoning was a little bit more based on Cece as an ally, and just that she doesn't seem like was super engaged with the strategic part of the game.
No, I mean, Michelle...
And not great at challenges either, so...
I mean, she sunk her own ship because Michelle came to her with the idea of changing the votes and left with, that she wasn't really engaged, so I don't really want to work with her.
Mm-hmm.
What Cece didn't even realize that was her opportunity to save herself.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem like she cared.
Well, my guess is that it's not so much that as much as...
She took the path of least resistance in believing that all three Gen Xers would stay together.
Right. So she thought that's what was going to happen, and so she didn't need to worry about it, and she was just shutting down other avenues because let's not make trouble. We know what's going to happen. Let's just not make waves and just move forward. But it's also kind of that sort of attitude is just a sign of someone who's really not keeping an awareness of all the angles in play.
Right, and it seemed almost like she wanted to not make waves because it was better for her, the way she likes to play, which is to not be engaged in the strategy, for there to be a vote that didn't require making waves.
Yeah.
As opposed to it actually being like the best scenario is let's not make waves. It's like, oh, phew, I don't have to do this whole strategic thing. I can just chill, And so I think that she absolutely should have been the one to go. Did I lose this call?
No, I'm here. I'm still here. Are you not seeing me? I see you. It's fine.
No, my windows just changed themselves and put yours behind the internet browser without me touching anything. So.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I'm still here. Nothing changed on this end, I think.
Nope.
Anyway, yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about that as we get to that part of the episode. But before that, coming back from David refinding the idol, which is kind of great, made me happy. This is where we go to the new tribe mix-up. So our new tribes are Vanua in the orange buffs, and that is CC, Chris, Dave, Zeke, Michelle. And that was the one, we were kind of just talking about it. Had 3 Gen X, CC, Chris, and Dave, and then 2 millennials, Zeke and Michelle. And then I was really feeling for poor Zeke in that situation, just because not only in the minority, but in the minority with like probably his least favorite of the other millennials. And then we have Takali in the purple buffs, and this is Jessica, Ken, Adam, Taylor, and Figgy. And so despite the preview making it look like the mix-up was going to separate those two, it actually didn't. It just made them argue a little bit. But the fact that Taylor's response in his confessional was, "Rock on, Figtails continues." And I have to say, I have really ambivalent feelings about that, because on the one hand, gag, but on the other hand, I kind of like it. It's kind of funny. It is, of all the different sort of name portmanteaus to describe relationships, that one's pretty good. Figgy and Taylor are Figtails.
Yeah.
I like it. I at one time that I want to roll my eyes at the two of them just generally, I do actually like the name.
Well, until I saw the preview for next time where it looks like she's back into it again, I felt like this relationship was not long.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
He seems way more into it than she does. Like, she seems to just kind of like enjoy it, and he's like making a big thing about like wanting to like show it off and like, like I think she kind of digs the attention, like when he's like mouthing like "you're hot" like over and over again. And she's kind of like, "Hey, yeah, thanks," and like blows him a kiss. He's like, "No, you're hot." And she like kind of flips her ponytail, and he like keeps doing it. It's like, I feel like at some point she's just gonna be like, "Yeah, that was fun, and I appreciate all of the attention, but yeah, we need to have more than that."
He seems like he's not aware enough of what's going on around him to be a solid ally. You know what I mean? It's like he's going to end up spilling all of her plans without actually being able to contribute to them or forward them very well.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, I was actually not even suggesting it as from a strategic standpoint in Survivor, just more as a like
relationship. Yeah,
which is part of why we watch the show, is the social dynamics of it. The social dynamic I was witnessing in this one made this seem like this was kind of fun for her. But if he's going to keep being like over the top, like awkward about it, like it's going to cease to be fun sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it's interesting because recall back in the first episode, at the germination of this relationship, there was this bit where it felt to me like he was flirting with her, and she was not into it. And that was sort of their first exchanges. But then it seemed like he continued to flirt, and she just sort of got to a point where, like, yeah, okay, I guess so. He's good looking, I guess. And then, fine, okay, sure, why not? That sort of thing. Which doesn't mean she doesn't like him, but it does seem like it was him initiating things and her kind of going along.
Yes.
Which, you know, as you suggest, might indicate that there's an unequal amount of emotional investment in the relationship.
That's what it feels like. But
I tend to agree. In any case, this tribe has Jessica and Ken from the Gen X tribe, and they're in the minority against Adam, Taylor, and Figgy from Millennial tribe. Interesting. I mean, because Jessica and Ken staying connected, again, that just because that narrative kind of gets a narrative through line, that might have been why we saw more of her connecting with him and less of her maybe thinking Dave, but who knows.
Yeah.
And then the third tribe, which is green, and it was like Ikabua or something, and I didn't ever remember noticing when they were spelling it, so I don't remember exactly what it's spelled like. But so they have to start fresh, build a whole new shelter on a whole new beach, but as compensation, they get one extra person, and I'm thinking that's not much compensation. It's kind of like you have to do a whole bunch of extra work, but we'll make it a little bit easier than just doing a whole bunch. It's a little bit less extra work that other tribes don't have to do at all.
Yeah, it just seemed like, oh, well, we have an uneven number, so yeah, we'll give that as the benefit to the tribe, or the tribe.
And I mean, it's obviously fair. It's just, you know, it's randomized, right? So it's just luck of the draw. Who gets it? But so that tribe has everybody else, which is Michaela, Hannah, Jay, and Will from Millennial tribe, and then Sunday and Brett from Gen X tribe. So it is only the Vanua Orange tribe that had majority Gen Xers. And now they actually don't anymore. Which came up, you know, during the tribal council, which we'll talk more about. So Michaela is the most vocal about her displeasure that having to start the shelter over is not what she had in mind. And it's like, yeah, I get it, but what are you going to do? Like, I don't know. It was her expression of that frustration was a little bit weird. Like, I don't think she meant it literally, but just the way she was saying it, of like, clearly Probst did it wrong or something like that. Like, I know that that's not literally what she means. She is, I think, still just saying she is annoyed to have to do that. But still, I don't know, it just felt weird to say it that way.
Yeah.
So we got a few more scenes of the Green Tribe, Ikabua, building their new shelter. And it's funny to have Jay, the millennial, kind of reversing the trope a little bit in the sense of being unimpressed with Brett and Sunday because they're just passive. Like, they don't do anything unless you tell them to do it. And,
right.
You know, they don't have any initiative. But, you know, he's happy to have the millennials in majority, and that's certainly that's a comfortable thing for them to. That's a good position for them to be in, especially on that tribe. Just because, I mean, nothing against them as people, but Sunday and Brett were not the power players on that Gen X tribe. So, you know, I don't think the millennials on Ikabua are going to have a lot of trouble with them.
No.
They're not the ones that are likely to cause trouble by stirring the pot. Although I guess Sunday was with Lucy, one of the instigators last week, so who knows how much of her involvement that was. It seemed like Lucy driving it, but so in any case, this is where we had the argument we kind of talked about a little bit already, where Figgy wants to keep the relationship secret, kind of like, we already let it out of the bag at our old tribe. Can we try to keep it more of a secret here? And Taylor thinks that's dumb. He doesn't want to hide it. And then Adam is just sitting at the side going, you guys, come on. Especially because keeping it a secret is just sort of like, what? I wasn't with you guys before when we were all in the same tribe, but now it's just an expected thing that I'm just going to keep your secret for you because of course I am, because why wouldn't I?
Because I'm millennial.
Yeah. So you're kind of putting that on me that now I have to keep your secret too. And so I'm annoyed with you two for putting me in that situation. Because on the one hand, yeah, I'd like to maintain the millennial majority if we can. So I don't want to screw that up, but you're making me have to deal with your situation. And that's annoying. I related to his frustration there. Adam also does get along with Ken, so who knows? Maybe he would be interested in looking into something else.
Yeah, we just get the seeds of that obviously right now because they didn't go to tribal council.
Yep. So we have back at Orange Tribe, we have Michelle lamenting being in the minority. And it's kind of like she's sort of in the same boat as Zeke in the sense that they're both in the minority and neither of them especially cared for each other. And then, who knew that Chris and Zeke would just turn out to be fans of the same college team, the Sooners, right? And like, okay, so all of a sudden they're bonding now. You never know, I guess, sometimes, right? Wouldn't have necessarily predicted those two as good buddies, but seemed like they really are able to connect in their sports enthusiasm, and that it seems to stick. They like each other.
Yeah, I mean, they, again, from the social dynamics experiment of this show, that's how you build a quick relationship with somebody, is that you continue to probe at things until you find whatever it is, the one that like you agree upon, and then you dive into that and make that one blossom. Like find the common ground.
I kind of smiled when you were saying that only because it made me think of that Breakfast at Tiffany's song. But I said, what about Breakfast at Tiffany's?
Yeah.
And you said, oh, yes, I think I remember that film. And then it's like, I kind of hate that song, actually, because the whole point is that, like, they have nothing to talk about except that after kind of really probing and getting deep diving into small talk, they both remember that they each liked an old movie. And then, sure, hey, well, that's one thing we got. And the whole song feels like really having to reach hard to rationalize making a relationship out of just basic physical attraction.
Yes. I agree with you. However, I feel like that idea is valid when you don't yet know somebody.
Yeah, okay.
If you're deep into a relationship and you have nothing in common except you find this one very small thing. And also it should be more than just we both kind of liked this old film, which is not what these two guys found.
Yeah.
Like they are both this is something both of them are very passionate about. And that's what they connected on. And they both knew that and dove into that. So that's more of my point, is that's how you build a early relationship with somebody, is you find the common ground that you are both interested and passionate about, and it's not just, oh, hey, have you been to Oklahoma? Me too. which is more of what you're talking about with the song.
Yeah,
Like,
well, and yeah,
both went to Oklahoma once, and it was kind of cool. Like,
yeah.
no, this was something that is deeply embedded in both of their childhoods and their growth into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I loved it, though, because it is kind of funny because
Oh, yeah.
you see Zeke kind of geek out about, you know,
I made a friend!
well, not just that, but the fact that, you know, who would have, I mean, you wouldn't have thought that Zeke would be this huge football fan,
Mm-hmm.
and he is, of the University of Oklahoma, and his favorite team, Chris played on. So he, like, geeks out even more, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I didn't mean to downplay my enthusiasm for those two connecting. And I definitely agree that finding something like that is great for breaking the ice in a new sort of situation. I didn't mean to really directly compare it to that song, except that it just reminded me of that. I mean, because the song really is much more along the lines of, I'm pretty sure I want to bone you, but I feel like we should be able to have a conversation, and I can't think of anything. So, can you think of anything? Oh, there's a movie. Yeah, okay. Want to go somewhere? And whereas
I always took the song completely different.
Really? Okay, maybe I never really listened to anything except the chorus.
I'm not saying I'm right because I didn't study it or anything.
Yeah.
The song is that they had this long-term relationship and they were about to break up. And he's searching for anything to connect with her on, and that's all they can find. And he's trying to, like, use that as, like, enough to save his relationship, but it's obviously not enough, like, because it's silly. That's how I always took it, but I don't do it well enough.
Yeah, I'm curious now. Not curious enough to look it up right now, but it's just reminds me, I guess, that in all the times that I've heard that song, I feel like I've only ever really heard the lyrics of the chorus. Like what they say during the verses, I can't remember. Like I don't recall any of those details of the verses between the choruses. Anyway, Zeke and Chris connect, which seems good, and it makes me happy to have Zeke get an ally because I like him and I don't want him to get voted out. And especially an ally in Chris, who is already sort of feeling a little burned by the other Gen Xers and therefore up for potentially doing something with.
Do you want me to just close out the Breakfast at Tiffany's thing with my win?
Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Maybe not. I mean, I pulled up the lyrics. And
if you got it, sure, go ahead. If you got it, I'll accept my my defeat gracefully.
I mean, the song even opens up with, like, you know, because the way that you obviously haven't listened to the other, but the thing, like, the in between lyrics are a little bit slower, and there's emphasis on, like, I'm reading it, so I know it's the fourth and fifth line. I wouldn't have known that just listening to it. You know, there's sort of just the way that it kind of plays out. So the emphasis lines in the first chorus are, you say the world has come between us, our lives have come between us. You know, that doesn't sound like somebody you're just meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the next, and even in the chorus, it says, hold on, let me pull it back up again. I lost it here.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Talking About That Song with Breakfast at Tiffany's in it. Is that even what the song is called?
Yes. And so then the next chorus, it says, you know, the emphasis piece is, you know, so what now? It's plain to see we're over, and I hate when things are over.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I will...
got nothing in common. Yeah, like...
I'll definitely concede that then, but I will also argue as the last gasp of my dying argument that the chorus, I feel like, makes more sense in my version than in that version. I don't know, just because I feel like why does remembering one movie that they
both liked it if he didn't already know her?
Well, no, because I thought that it was, hey, what about this movie? And she's like, oh yeah, I think I remember that. He doesn't. It's not presented like he knows she remembers it. He's asking her if she remembers
Then
it.
he follows up with, and if I recall, I think we both kind of liked that. Yeah.
Yeah. So fair enough. I'm just saying that I was annoyed by the song, and maybe I read my own negativity into it for that reason.
Yeah. So yeah, the way just to close out how I took the chorus was that them enjoying breakfast at Tiffany's together was sort of it's a microcosm of their whole relationship. Is that he's seeing these moments as something different than they were, because he sees them enjoying the movie Breakfast at Tiffany's as like this great memory of his. She felt when he mentions it to her, she's like, yeah, I think I remember that film. Like, she doesn't even connect that that's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And then so he has to say, yeah, and if I recall, we both kind of liked it. That's one thing we got. Like, all of a sudden he's kind of reeling because he's starting to realize that the moments that were big for him are trivial for her. Maybe that's too deep, but that's how I always took the song.
It's interesting. Just because, again, like, even knowing that it's about a breakup, that's not how I would read it. But let's move on, because that's not at all what this episode is about.
This isn't talking about stuff?
No. But yeah, so anyway, feel free to leave a comment, everybody, if you have a different interpretation of that song. In the meantime, let's move on to the immunity challenge.
Yes.
This was another one that was continuing sort of the thing they've been doing the last couple of seasons, which is introducing a lot more choices into challenges. So, like, you have the option of trying to make that grapple throw and pull the basket closer, or just try to make the shots as they're longer. Kind of a neat complication. Although I think they all ended up pulling it. What?
It turned out to be less neat in practice.
Yeah, well, kind of. They all ended up pulling it closer, right?
Well, except that the team that was the farthest behind, which was the mechanism of the challenge, is that if you're coming from behind, you can take these Hail Mary shots and maybe catch up.
Yeah.
But Chris, the biggest and strongest of them, couldn't even reach where it was before reeling it in. Like, it couldn't even get to the platform. And maybe somebody else could have done. Maybe it was his technique or whatever, it had nothing to do with him being strong. But they ended up having to then go and reel it in because you couldn't actually shoot on it way far away.
Yeah.
So in practice, it didn't actually work the way that it was designed. At least that's how I saw it.
It was too far away when it was far away. Yeah. I could see that. They certainly all did end up reeling it in. But yeah, so Michaela was kind of another challenge MVP. Just making one shot after another for her team.
Yeah.
She did a great job. She's definitely one of their strongest challenge members. Although I say there because it's complicated now because they've all switched up. But certainly she was strong on Millennial Tribe, and she's strong now on her Ikabua tribe. So they win thanks to her just making like something like 4 scores out of 6 throws or something like that.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what it looked like.
Well. Just got diminished by her. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they came in a little bit later, but she was just so fast.
Yeah, she got her rhythm much faster. I mean, even her misses were like the rim outs. Kim had a couple of those. Yeah, she didn't miss any of the shots. They didn't have the right, like, whatever speed or angle, and they just kind of popped out. Yeah.
Yeah. So Takali gets second place with Ken shooting. It's a little closer though between, like, because Green Tribe just like dominated, and then 2 and 3 were a little closer together. But the only other note I have during the challenge is, of course, we had Cece taking a long time, which is not the first time. She's been slow in the challenge. But then also David losing the thing into the water on the other side and having to get back into the water to get it. It was a little bit of a weird thing that, like, did they have to climb up while holding the thing? They couldn't just, like, put it up there and then climb up?
No, they could do that. A lot of them did do that.
I was going to say, so, like, when the people who were struggling were trying to climb up while holding it, and I was like, why are you doing that?
Yeah, David's team even yelled at him, put it up there.
Yeah.
And,
so,
and that's
like,
the problem. That's what happened is that he, like, that's why it went off, is he, like, threw it up there instead of just setting it up there.
Yeah.
So when he threw it, it, like, rolled over to the other side because he put it up there with momentum. And he climbed up, and it was, like, going, and then he kind of, like, chased it like a, Keystone Cop,
Yeah.
So.
It gave me the impression watching it that David had actually cost the team more than Cece had, but did seem like everyone else later was more focused on Cece, and I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't have that impression at all. Like, Cece was just miserable. Like, because he at least, like, went and got his thing and then, like, got to the platform. Like, she was just, like, couldn't even, like, it's not that she couldn't swim. She swam and got it. She couldn't swim with it for whatever reason. And then, like, once she got to the platform, it was just, like, she was just in, like, one place forever.
Yeah.
It felt like to me like she was, I didn't time it, but,
Well, we're also getting edited version. It's a little harder to gauge that.
True.
But certainly everybody else afterwards seemed more focused on her than him. So that in and of itself is kind of an indication.
Yeah.
So in any case, with Ikabula green and Takali purple, both immune, Banua orange going to tribal. And my note here is, don't make me choose between Zeke and David. And then just before commercial, we get a little bit setting it up like that's Zeke sets it up like CC and David are the two that it would be down to because they're very slow. No, okay, I take it back. Because what he said going into commercial at this point was frustration that they were in the majority, but they're the ones that were slow, and it will be hard to get one of them out because they're in the majority.
Yeah.
That's what he said. I was having to interpret my note. So coming back, we spend the rest of the episode with that tribe. And then David and Cece, at least at first, seem just really like, well, of course we would stay with our Gen X majority. Why wouldn't we? That at least seems the initial situation. But Chris, in the meantime, is actually plotting with Zeke to vote out Cece. And I was surprised when Chris brought in David on the plot because I was just thinking,
you don't need him.
You don't need him. And would he, like, could he potentially screw something up? Like,
yeah.
if you.
Well, I was going to say this. I didn't realize it until we just now started talking through it. It almost betrays my original argument that Chris doesn't seem to be one to think long term. Because I actually thought this is what my note here was that he was thinking long term in, he wants to work with these millennials now, but he wants to preserve his Gen X relationship with someone who was on the winning side of multiple votes. Like, he does mention that, like, David's got connections everywhere. Like, so he is thinking, like, if I can get David to agree to this, and then he's created in sort of his grandstanding, he's made it a test of David also. So he's now not only kept, like, in his mind, which I'm not saying I 100% agree with how he went, like, how he got to this, but he is at least thinking it through. Is, okay, David's got a lot of connections, so if we're going to make this move, I want him on board, because then we move on together, and if we get back up with the people that he's with, like he and I can be together. And this is the test to see if he and I actually ever can work together, because I get this is a game, and he made those moves and surprised me, but if it's advantageous to us to do this, like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And so I feel bad that I discounted him just because of his grandstanding of thinking long term. I still don't think that that's enough to change the fact that, like, David should have played the idol, like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I definitely
thinking things through a little bit more,
mm-hmm.
at least in my mind.
Yeah.
That's why I think he brings David in, and that's why he said he brought David in.
Yeah.
Connections.
Well, and that, and also just the idea that if you're operating under the theory you don't need David because you have Michelle and Zeke, and that's 3 of 5. But at the same time, it's a 3 of 5 where he's now the only Gen X in that 3. Mm-hmm. And he has to trust Zeke and Michelle, and Zeke is the one he actually trusts. And Zeke has told him that he doesn't especially trust Michelle. So maybe that's an uncertain enough thing. They don't feel like they can trust Michelle, even if it would be in Michelle's interest to vote with them this time, if they still feel like, well, but we can't really count on her. Let's try to be sure. And especially if David is a little sensitive about also not doing great in the challenge, maybe that will make him more amenable now.
Yeah, and can you imagine if they had done that, like, done the exact vote that they did to get rid
mm-hmm.
of Cece, but had convinced David that that was not the case,
mm-hmm.
what his paranoia would look like right now?
Yeah.
And the difficulty that they would have, like, ever getting him, like, he almost pulled the idol out for himself in this episode. Like, I think he knew that wasn't the case, but he even talked about that.
Well,
because he was like, I have it, so I should just use it. Like, and it's
he's also kind of riding high from just immediately finding it again after playing it the last time. So, but at the same time, it's also true that Michelle specifically talking about maybe wanting to vote for David has got David feeling like, well, okay, who can I trust here? Because Chris was not really on my side before. And now he's trying to pull me in to vote out one of the people who kind of was on my side before. And siding with the other tribe to do it, I can see why David would have some hesitation there.
Yes, and Michelle here, we talked a little bit about how she had bought some credibility with me just because of her efficacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's still hard to argue. Like, she has remained effective in what she was doing, and she did make a good judgment call after approaching Cece. She's clearly perceptive on some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What she hasn't been perceptive on yet is David's paranoia. Like, she obviously hasn't seen that yet and figured that out. Because to go to David's ally and suggest, like, vote him off, and then have her, like, and notice that she's, like, nonchalant. Or, actually, I take a step back. Let me finish the thought that I had. So, and then go to what just popped into my head. So I was, like, really frustrated with her because it's like, well, you had a plan, and then you went and approached her, and I appreciate how you understood that she wasn't down for it. But then you went and, like, antagonized him again in tribal council and, like, said, I think David should go, but that's not what's on the table right now. Like, I was like, you just are misreading him completely. But then the thought popped in my head, maybe when she made the decision to approach Cece, realized she wasn't down for it, but then also realized she would probably go tell her alliance that she had been approached by Michelle, that it didn't make sense to not deny that in tribal council and own that she had said that. And then repair it later and go, David, yeah, at the time, that's what I wanted to do, but this is where we are now, and I want to work with you, like, next time. So we'll see how she plays it out. So a little benefit of the doubt, like, because it would have been worse if she'd been like, oh no, I've always been with this, and they're like, no, we know that you went to CC.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still torn on her. Like, I didn't like her, and then I liked her. And
I feel like part of what's
going like her this time, but I might actually like her if she plays her way out of this. But again, her efficacy has proven me, she's making work what she needs to make work. So
what's interesting about Michelle, and this is maybe this is just a gut feeling, but tell me what you think about it, is that more than most of the other players, she's kind of already playing a solo game, which doesn't mean she can't work with people, but it almost seems like she's not really connecting with the others on as deep a social level. It feels a little more superficial to me.
Yes. I agree. I feel like what she's doing is what has in the past been described and sort of owned as creating the voting blocks,
mm-hmm.
but without branding that idea and getting other people on board with it. Mm-hmm. So the concept that she's working is identical. It's an iteration of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, like, but you're right. I don't feel like she's working to generate these large bonds. It's sort of, it's much more create what's best for me right now that has a potential to be good for me in the future. Like, it's not all short term, but it's not all, it's like, oh, hey, if it doesn't go my way this time, then it doesn't mean I can't work with you. It's not
right.
Hey, if David doesn't do what I want, I'm going to choke him. It's sort of like, yeah, if David doesn't do what I want, I'll be disappointed, but then I'll move on,
Mm-hmm.
But she's sort of that flippant all the time.
Yeah.
Instead of just internalizing it, or as whoever coined the voting blocks thing, I thought that was amazing, because what they did was give what they branded and okayed something that, if you don't, is what Michelle is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they sort of like, oh no, this is what we do. We do the voting blocks. And so they own the fact that you don't have to, like, be loyal to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And she hasn't done that. She's doing the technique without the overarching branding to it, So
yeah, I wonder if it's just that strategic element. Like, I almost am hesitant to be saying this, just because it's kind of, in a way, it could be read like a personal indictment. And, watching her on the show, I can't really say that I know her well enough to conclude this about someone. But sort of the gut feel I get with her is that it's kind of just like, it's not even just the game. It just seems like she's maybe always kind of like that. Like, she knows how to be polite and interact with people and be friendly and all that, but it seems like it's still, there's a separation there internally.
Isn't she a bartender?
Maybe. I thought she was like the religious missionary one. I can pull it up.
Or is Figgy the bartender?
Well, I'll pull it up. I'm going to have it up in a moment.
I will have the same conclusion, but worded differently, no matter which one she.
Yeah, Michelle is the missionary recruiter.
Recruiter. Okay, so I'm gonna take the religious piece out of it. I mean, she's a recruiter. Okay, so that's her job, is to, separate situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I've dealt with recruiters before, and like their job is to make the prospective job person and the prospective job hunter feel like what they're doing is the most important thing at the time. Like, oh, you are the number one position that I need to fill, and oh, you are one of the top candidates to fill this position that I have. When they have a whole slew of positions,
mm-hmm.
and that's sort of a technique that happens, and that would make sense that she would behave like that.
Yeah,
because that's how she has developed in her interactions with people, and and it explains something that the other thing I was kind of thinking about her is like, clearly she can read people because she's made some great judgments from time to time.
Definitely.
So she has the sense of how to read people. She thinks strategically. She thinks long term. She thinks how this game works.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like she's just wrong, and like that's a thing. Like you can make strategic decisions, and you can read people, and you can just be incorrect. And I feel like there's a couple of those moments with her too.
Yeah. It's funny. Given that whole conversation, it just brings up what David was kind of talking about when he was discussing whether to play as idol or not, and talking about playing chess. And that kind of connects to some of what you were saying in terms of like the recruiter mindset, is that you're seeing the other players not so much as social peers, but more as, game pieces. Some of them are in your way. Some of them could be used as tools. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a completely mercenary, sociopathic thing. That's not what I mean.
No,
but
at the end of the day, there is a result that these different people who are involved in that, at one point the result is going to affect and connect some of them, and the others are going to be cast aside, and you would have had to have created the relationship that made all the ones who were cast aside feel like they were and at some point that you have to disengage yourself from that when it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah. And I think it just all connects to kind of what I was originally saying, which is that she, more than everybody else, feels like she's already at the stage of the game where every person she sees is sort of an obstacle in the way of her getting to the $1 million at the end, which is true throughout the game, but it's also true that it's more typical that people are playing kind of a team mindset game early on.
Right.
And then they switch into that mode later. And then you might kind of walk the line somewhat, but it just has felt like she's kind of always been on that track of the solo game.
Just to continue the recruiter analogy, what you're describing for the most effective recruiters is probably actually how they should be doing it. Because at the beginning, what you do as a recruiter, you get what the client wants, and then you go vet a bunch of people. But you don't make the decision. You create a team of people. So you have to get your whole team together. And like, even though they're not working with each other, like the idea is that you have this group that you're then carrying on through the interview process, and you're prepping all of them the same way, and you're turning over the client, and you're having this open discussion with the client about the position. So the whole, when you get it down to like 8 people, like you're invested in all 8 people equally, and you're not looking at the end game quite yet. Your whole idea is to get the team that you have deemed the best to the client and present their best sides. And then once it starts to wither out, that's when it becomes the individual game. It almost works exactly like this, is that there's a large group that you whittle away the fat, and then there's the good team that you want to do their best and identify who is the elite out of.
Oh,
you could be a better recruiter.
You froze up just for a second there, but you seem like you're back, so it seems fine. There was kind of a hiccup. Oh, are you frozen again? What's going on?
No, it's fine on my end.
Okay. Yeah, your image froze for a little while, but I was able to hear you still. Okay, so anyway, yes, that's Michelle. She is an interesting player, to be sure. She makes...
Yes.
I agree with your assessment.
I'm personally intrigued by her. So.
But in any case, when this is another situation a little bit like with Jessica, where Chris and David go to talk to Michelle and Zeke to basically say, don't worry, it is CC that's going to go. And we know that they mean it. That's that's what they really intend to do. But Michelle is suspicious. She feels a little bit like, well, isn't that what you would tell me if it really was going to be me? And it's interesting just because we have David on the other end feeling a little bit like the same. Are you still there? You're frozen again on my screen. Oh, your sound's cutting in and out and stuff too. Okay, looks like we're having some sort of communication hiccups. But in any case, maybe we're getting close to the end of the episode, so we can just kind of move on.
Yeah, I think we're good now. It seems like we are. Yeah,
it seems like it's back now, but it was just kind of off and on.
Okay.
But in any case, I can hear you now. And so what we have is a situation where we've got 4 of 5, in theory, on the same page. But on one end, you've got Michelle worried that it's actually her. On the other end, you've got David worried that it's actually him. And each of them are a little bit concerned that it might be that they're just getting told a story. But in the long run, and Mike has just dropped out of the call. So unfortunately, something seems to be happening with the internet connection. So I will invite him to come on, but otherwise I'll just come back and hopefully we can just, we're almost close to the end. So let me try to get him back in. And so I've sent the invite, but in the meantime, what we're at here is a situation where there's some discussion about, hey, and yeah, so something's clearly unstable about the connection at the moment. But we're coming into the tribal council. Perfect. And Michelle's a little suspicious, and that makes David paranoid. And David is feeling a little bit conflicted about turning on CC, which is understandable. But when he talks about potentially playing his idol again, I agree with you, and this is what we talked about earlier on, that it would have been much more a mistake to play it this time than it was, or if it was last time. Yep. So we could have the argument about Jessica, but it seems pretty clear to me that it would have been a mistake to try to keep CC. Partly just because it's one thing to say you preserve Jessica as an ally who could maybe actually help you, but CC seems like a nice person, but she's not really she's not able to support you in challenges or in the strategy. It's just kind of hard to engage strategically with her.
She's just a body at this point.
Yeah. I mean, she's a vote, but that's not enough if you can't actually plan with her. But so in any case, the one other note I had about the tribal council is that it felt like Probst was kind of weirdly off the mark in a number of times, where he was asking his usual sort of probing questions. But given what we had seen about what was actually going on, it seemed like he was off in the weeds a little bit compared to where the real issues were. Right. More so than usual. Because usually he's just right there. He just zeroes in right on whatever's actually going on. But this time it seemed like he was a little more off-center. Did you feel that way at all? Or
Yes.
Yeah?
And I wondered if, he either, number one, did get it a little bit, but kind of wanted to see how this played out, so didn't dive into it, or if they edited it that way so that to not tip what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Or maybe he just didn't quite read it right, Yeah. But I had those two thoughts, because he did seem a little less on his game.
Yeah, just because usually he's just so on point, and this time he was less so. So just it was enough that seems like we both noticed.
Yes, well, I definitely noticed. Yeah.
Yeah. So. But in any case, the votes looks like it was unanimous. CC voted for Michelle, and then everyone else voted for CC. And I think as an indication of maybe his own recognition of being kind of off track, his final thought was like super generic and like self-contradictory. Excuse me. Basically, what he said as they're leaving is, one thing this group of 4 can be sure of is that you can trust each other unless you're the one being lied to. And I just feel like it's like a cheap fortune cookie. It's just, it's not, yeah. So anyway, I think that was maybe an indication of him kind of grasping at straws a little bit, having realized that he was not connecting in the same way that he typically does. Maybe he's just distracted by something that time.
Yeah.
In any case, next time, the secret is out about the power couple, and then we get in, obviously, from, I think it was Adam that said that. And then a challenge where people get made dizzy, and there's more medical stuff, and a clip of Hannah saying, "You're not going to let me die." Or, she says it in a scared way, and I'm only kind of saying it in a sort of dismissive, contemptuous way because these previews, are constantly screwing us over with those little out of context snippets. But yeah, we'll see.
The previews aren't for us. They're for the casual viewer who tuned in and they want to hook into the show.
Yeah. It's the flashy attempts at drama that are separated from the longer term strategy of the game, which is fine. But you're right, it's not for us. So we'll see. Hopefully, no one really has to be evacuated. And then final words from Cece. They're pretty classy, good sport, sort of standard stuff. But it's really kind of further drove home, I think, that she was maybe not as engaged in the game at that point. She was, not like happy to be voted out, but you could also see that it's not like there was maybe part of it was a little bit of a relief.
Yeah.
So in any case, that'll do it for this time. Thank you for viewing and or listening, everybody. And something I forgot to mention last week, but I'll mention again, is that I've started a new podcast called So Many Levels, where I am playing Dungeons and Dragons with people. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out. It's also on the same YouTube channel. You can also find the video and podcast versions at christianaellis.com, where you can find other episodes of this show too, and everything else that I do. christianaellis.com.
Perfect.
All right. Have a good week. You, Mike, and everybody else out there.
Sounds good.
All right. Bye now.
Bye.